Chapter 15, The Kiss. In the last chapter, I mentioned that I asked Lynn out, and we spent a weekend together at outdoor events in Wilmington and Carolina Beach, North Carolina. This might be taken out of context to imply something more intimate happened, something more than holding hands. That's not what I meant. I dropped her off at her home after the fireworks on the 4th of July and picked her up the next day for the poetry reading that was also in Carolina Beach. Plus, it's hard to describe, but there was something more that I felt just holding hands for a few moments when we walked out on that slippery jetty. That's the thing with feelings. Sometimes we discover a language that exists that cannot be expressed in thoughts or words. After all, words are the medium by which we think. I was still struggling with my shyness, but only in vague ways. I had insecurities about whether I was really that special. If only one person, Kelta, had looked at me like I was their whole world, like they could love me and or choose to be with me exclusively. Maybe she was shy too. I played these ideas over in my mind. What does she think of me? Is she into me? As I said earlier, this was a bit surprising to me. I had been grieving the loss of Kelta for a long time, but I would not have pursued Lynn if I was not over that loss. After that 4th of July weekend, I was so invested in wanting to see Lynn every day and as much as possible. I would find myself at work trying to come up with things we could do together that afternoon. It wasn't hard because she lived across the street from the beach. She lived on Wrightsville Beach, just across the street from the beach, the ocean. Her mother, Diane, and stepfather, Bob, owned a house that was to be their retirement home, and she was living in that house. I have to admit that I was working hard here to persuade her to make plans with me. For a little while I felt like I was having to try hard to persuade Lynn to spend time with me. That was the last thing I wanted. I wanted to be the focus of someone's interest and attention. I was very invested in making sure that I did nothing to cause her to back off for any reason at all. It would not make sense to talk her into doing something that she didn't want to do. That would defeat the purpose. From my conversations with other guys or from TV shows, no one incident stands out. It seemed that I wasn't like any guys that I knew. I just felt like I was more feminine for as long as I can remember, like I wasn't fully male. Plus, guys seem to make assumptions that a girl is into them if they are seeing them regularly, and they will pursue more of their desires. Anyway, as I was saying, I don't identify with those ways of thinking, and if that means that I'm not very masculine, you are catching on, dear reader. I am not much of a man. I certainly didn't assume anything. I would take whatever I could get in terms of a relationship with Lynn. The topic of whether we were seeing anyone else never came up. I am sure with my persistence, she must have known that I was only into her. It was difficult because I had to ensure that I never did anything to push her away. It wasn't that I had low self-esteem, but I just sensed that she was strong, psychologically and emotionally. I sensed that she didn't need to be in a relationship, and I didn't feel entitled to her time. In talking to other females years later, I have learned that many of them do want to be in a relationship and to be a wife someday. This is not something I would ever recognize with Lynn. She seemed to find our relationship to be something that happened to her as unexpectedly as it did for me. I felt a bit weird to be pursuing and not finding the interest I had reciprocated for a while. How could I know that would change? Why was I so obsessed with and excited to just be talking to Lynn or sitting next to her on the beach, maybe holding hands? I noticed that the first couple of months with Kelta were more comfortable for me, and there was more of a sense of mutual interest. With Lynn, for nearly the first 2 months, I felt like I had to persuade her to do things every day. Maybe it didn't take a full 2 months for me to start seeing that Lynn was very interested in me. I was just frustrated for a while that I had to try so hard to persuade her to spend time with me. To be clear, as I describe this, I honestly wasn't thinking of Kelta at all for the first time. Anyway, this time that I spent with Lynn, it was becoming something of a routine. I guess I liked it when her stepfather or her mother was there. "Is Lynn there?" I'd ask if they picked up the phone. With her mother, Diane, the response was, "Just a moment." With Bob, it was a deep voice with no friendliness in the tone saying, "Hold on." Then I would hear, "It's Bruce." I remember how I would show up early sometimes after work. At one point, I was parking down the street from her home and would pass the time reading from the paperback book that I had. It had the stories Alice in Wonderland and Through the Looking Glass by Lewis Carroll. I respected what she had said was a good time for me to show up. I was too nervous about showing up early. Again, there was no way I was going to do anything to make her uncomfortable or to act in any way with disrespect. I didn't have to work really hard to persuade Lynn to go out each day. I just wanted her to call me more, sound excited when I called, and help me to feel that she was interested in me. I would later find out from Lynn that initially, for a little while, I was more interested in spending time with her every day than vice versa. That would change. When I recount stories like this to people these days, they seem to comment from the perspective of how things normally work when a guy and a girl are dating. For example, I was talking to a female friend of mine, and she said something along the lines of, a woman wants a guy to, or I try to explain that I am not like most guys. I don't think Lynn wanted a traditional guy. Our first kiss. There was a synchronicity of desires that unfolded. We are just sitting together on the beach in October and we know what we want. The world seems to pause. I am sitting on her right, looking into her eyes. I can feel where our arms touch, our sides and legs. Her blonde hair waves a bit in the gentle wind. There is an expectancy between us. As I move a bit closer, she leans in and our heads turn in unison, mine tilting to the right, hers to the left. I place my arm over her legs onto the sand to keep balance. She then reaches her left arm to my back as she leans forward, bringing our lips together. I feel her other arm move to my back and our lips part ever so slightly. We kiss. The best part of this is that it is our first kiss. There is no part of this where I have to wonder if this is something she is letting happen or going along with it. I have heard people say, "He kissed me," and then they respond that they kissed them back. No, we kiss. Together as one shared action that happens.